It was a huge blessing. Them saying like that starkly, if this isn't fixed very rapidly, like we're going to go, force us to sort of get out of our heads of pie in the sky, things we can build to these are real customers with problems today. And if we don't, resolve it, one, we'll lose a customer, but two, whatever you hear in a bad customer support ticket, you have to assume there's 10 times as many customers who have that issue and will churn.
Starting in 2019, you raised your first round of funding, which was a seed financing.
That's right.
I'd love to hear your perspective on that raise versus your raise when you were a first-time founder and what that experience was like.
I'll give you the ramp version and I'll contrast it with the very first time. It was a very different time. The ramp version, it was much more of a design process, which is like, I would love to, we're second-time founders, we're trying to create a business focused on helping your business save money in time. I'd love to go save money for your business. And so it was much more, could I get your advice? We tried to do this with finance teams, founders, people we looked up to, different business owners. And I would say one of the adages that really stuck with me was, if you ask for money, you'll get advice. If you ask for advice, you might get money. And the second time that we fundraised, we tried to take this to heart. We didn't go out fundraising. We actually just went and said, hey, we're building this thing. We'd love to help you. And also we love your advice. And a lot of people kind of fell in love with the problem, and said, this is really interesting. This is a real problem I have.
And these people being customers who would then introduce you to venture.
So
or were you talking to venture folks as well? Like, what's that?
So before even talking to venture, folks, we spent, a lot of times actually with other, let's say CEOs and founders. So take Z Raitano at Row, a large direct to consumer e-commerce seller, or Karen Castelletti of Everbody, or Jen Ruby of Away, different kind of folks where they're running a business. They have different problems to solve, in their company. And so we'd spoken to angels. And so it came to the point where after, 30, 40 of these conversations, there was like a dozen half saying, look, if you do this, like we would be very interested in using the product or being a design customer, like help us save money. And by the way, if you put a company together, call me. I'm interested. These are folks who, we'd done some research, they'd made some angel investments before, and it started to tee this thing up. And so then later, by the time we were having conversations with VCs, it was, okay, we're very close, or we're running this card, it's saving us money. We've got all these people who are ready, are curious, or we've saved them X amount of dollars. They've had these soft commitments to go and invest. And at some point we just started to open up a note, and VC said, well, like, wait a minute, this is interesting. It seems like they don't need my help, right? Like they have customers, they have money, they've got a product that's kind of working. And that to me, I think is the best pitch for like an early round. It's like, they clearly don't need my help. I'm adding capital maybe to get in, but I just want to find my way into this thing. And well, it's not easy to create. I think if you can do that, that helped a lot.
Yeah. No, you said, asking for advice as opposed to for money, but really you weren't asking for advice. You were offering to be helpful and to give advice to your prospective customers. And that ended up. So I every now and then people reach out to me like, hey, I would love your advice. And there's not really much. And it's like, okay, you're fundraising. But what you're saying is actually the best thing to do is to really engage with people and drive to value and be material in how you do that. So I think that's great. Great example. And it all relates, right? Like it related to customer development, it related to product development, and it related to you ending up getting the seed round done. Got it. So 2019, you get your first customers live, you build some kind of momentum with initial set of angels, you raise your seed round, you get the product live in 2020, I think. February is when you go live thereabouts. Would love to hear what the next phase of growth, kind of going from that 0 to 100 million of revenue, opening up the market, getting out of beta, what that looked like, what went well, but also like what were some of the growing pains?
We had a ton. I mean, so we launched in February 2020. Super exciting, right? Like we had a very different kind of narrative coming to market of, it's the first corporate card that's designed to help you spend less. This company wants you to spend less. And that story was different enough that people were interested in writing about it, talking about it, all that. So we had kind of a big launch. We're based in New York City, so half the team got sick. We didn't know why. 3 weeks later, we figured it out when the pandemic kind of kicked off. And very instantly, we learned that there was two things that stuck with us. First, we learned, what does it mean to be a business engaged with risk? You wake up one day and you realize, wow, wait a minute, we have millions of dollars out, and we don't know who these people are on the other end of it. And so I think it was a kind of an interesting crucible moment as we were thinking about, what does it mean to have effective risk systems, and how do you chase not just purchase volumes from the start, but be thinking about what does it take to ensure that as companies are going into free fall, as some states were shutting down business full stop, what it meant to be even a card that didn't intend to be putting money out. How do you approach risk properly? So we can talk about that. we had a huge boost in some ways over the next year or so. Because when you think about the corporate card market, it has been dominated by American Express for so many years. I mean, I think that they're still over 40% plus of the market. Where they have enormous unfair advantages are, selling a card, you have great status, they're metal, they're beautiful, you have access to lounges, you have points that translate into great travel benefits, and all those things that they were excellent at suddenly didn't matter. You couldn't flex on anybody with a metal card on your kitchen counter. You weren't going to hang out in a travel lounge, and you weren't going to book any award travel using points. And so suddenly it leveled the playing field and opened up kind of the space for a business like ours that I think would have, I would like to think we would have done fine, but would have been a harder slog to suddenly, our pitches are on saving you money. One of the main players just got sort of defanged for a long period of time and allowed us to start to go build up risk functions and sort of take on parts of the market very, very well. And so those were, I think, the big challenge and opportunity we took on. I think other things that helped us, like I would say we launched, but it wasn't like just taking off and a completely vertical chart until probably later in the year. There were some opinionated decisions that we were trying to make too that slowed us at the beginning but allowed us to go faster later. And I think one example of that, where once we cracked it, things really started picking up. Most of our competitors all integrated with other expense management software, with like Expensify, Concur, all that. And this pain point that we kept hearing was, the card's fine, but like no one turns the receipts in on time. It's sort of obnoxious. And we said, okay, well, we're not going to integrate. We're going to build our own and go faster. And that actually turned off a lot of business for a long time. Many people just said, I'm not using you. I'm an accountant. I don't have time for this like new age BS, your approach to expense reports. And it took us a lot of months to actually get it to the point where truly we could show and go to a customer and say, not only is this robust and you can have your audits rely on this process, but you can integrate with Expensify and pay X amount per month and enjoy receipts that are turned in like a month later for most customers we talk to, or you could use Ramp and have your receipts turned in within 30 minutes or less is the average. And that once we finally were able to get really the product clean enough, simple enough, streamlined enough, and have the opinionated decision point pay off, we were then ready to, okay, we could, it's a software that displaces others. We're cutting spend for you. We have benefits that are more valuable than travel points. We can underwrite with confidence that we're ready to take on the volume. We ended up having no losses that year. And, so we're ready to scale. And so happy to talk through each, but 2020 was an interesting year.
Yeah. So the initial is COVID hits, a little terrifying from a credit perspective, but actually unlocks some things in terms of market advantages relative to other things that are going on. Would love to hear if there are any kind of bumps along the roads or like key product unlocks and features that you had to build or release or new infrastructure providers you had to swap out to help scale on as you continued to grow.
Yeah. Look, I think that a lot of the most interesting products that we built has been around just being very deliberate and consistent around looking for pain and for problems. I think when people are building, often it's a painful enough experience. Often you're trying to see what people like, what's going well. And I think usually the breakthrough moments in our product have been, we're trying to discover when people are very unhappy with either a part of Ramp or an adjacency. And so both the replacement of us fully building expense management and streamlining that, and us ultimately going to bill pay, which is our like an extraordinarily rapidly growing product. Ramp came out of NPS surveys and actually going to customers and asking if there's one part of your financial stack that you wish Ramp could replace, what is it? And both of these rose to the top. And so some of this is doing this in aggregate. Some of it is actually calling up customers frequently enough and being open to having some ring you out. Like there was one of our key customers, large scale player in the kind of extended, defense industry. And this was probably a year and a half ago. I think they called and said, we are about to leave. And,
was that a shock to you, or were you kind of aware that things had been
It was, look, I think folks in that industry just talk very bluntly and directly to each other. That throws a lot of people off. But yeah, I was not expecting it, right? Like we were excited about it, and I'd spent a lot of time on it personally. And the issue that they were having was, they have lots of contractors, different employees with different status. And, we had built a lightweight reimbursement product that was easy to approve one or two, and suddenly we had 1,000 people plus in that. You need to be ready for folks who are going to grow out of your product. And it was a huge blessing, right? Like I think them saying like that starkly, if this isn't fixed very rapidly, like we're going to go, force us to sort of get out of our heads of pie in the sky, things we can build to these are real customers with problems today. And if we don't, resolve it, one, we'll lose a customer, but two, I think the reality for most people building products is whatever you hear in a bad customer support ticket, you have to assume there's 10 times as many customers who have that issue and will churn. And I think probably the most useful thing that we've been able today, when we look back at the financial profile of Ramp as a business, one of the most defining features of it is we have almost no churn. It is, on the order and lower than even the level of businesses that just go out of business every year. Like people generally don't leave, and that's happened by solving not just for the new stuff, but making sure that as people are having issues, we're faster, we're responsive, we're thinking, and we're making our product robust so that as companies scale, they don't leave.
Yep. And so in this case, were you able to
Yes.
save it? Were you able to actually build some of those features and ship
All of
them?
it.
Yeah. I think now you do global payouts in like 100 plus countries or something like that. I don't know if that's related or a separate.
It is related. It's both. It's both. Well, some of it came from just the reimbursements product was meant to be, hey, like you're going to love using the card so much better, and it is a better experience. You do get cash back. You have much more control up front and more accounting automation. But there's some companies that are going to have the high number of reimbursements, and we've started to view it not as a second class product, but allowing people to review multiple reimbursements, to automatically batch more of the accounting, and just have that experience, even though it's not where we started. Be truly first class was important, and eventually it did lead into, I think we do reimbursements in 176 countries today in 80 currencies, and so it's come a long way.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting.